Hello, welcome to the 6th day of July 2025. My name is Kurt, and this is my daily Good Life meditation. This is an exercise that I do in the morning around 5:30, a little late this morning. I do this to remember it's a journal, it's my personal journal that I do publicly. You're welcome to watch and make comments if you like, although I don't read or respond to comments until I'm done. I do this, hold on, I wasn't quite ready. I started doing this after I wrote this book, Going Alone, back if I completed it in 2018. And I needed, after I wrote the book, and I had outlined my personal set of values, my creed as I call it, I needed a way to instantiate that creed into my life, to make it a part of my everyday, to tune and improve the creed, to measure how I was doing relative to the objectives and principles outlined therein. And so I started doing this, initially in my head, just as I rode my motorcycle to work each morning when I was living in Irvine, California, and commuting to Riverside. Did it in my head. Then I turned the camera on one day and did it while I was riding, and that was interesting. I did a better job. Found out that if I do this, turn on the camera and do this publicly, I always do a better job. It's like, if you know that there's a potential that someone might be watching, well, you kind of clean up your act. Now that serves my ends, because if I do a better job at aligning my life to my values, then I live a better life, and I live a life in greater accordance with my decided purpose and guidance. So that's what I'm doing here. But before I start, let me do a quick welcome to new subscribers. I'm glad you're here. And also a disclaimer that I do talk about sensitive subjects in this video, namely death, so be forewarned. And a huge thank you to those that watch my videos, who support me as members on YouTube and on Patreon. You make it possible for me to spend more time walking and thinking. All right, so let's begin. I always keep notes throughout the day. Yesterday's notes include one single note. Remember, each day I have one thing that I set for myself to do. And that thing yesterday was garden. So I always measure the day by looking at, well, I just recently started doing this. I'm going to measure the day, the last 24 hours, by looking at what my objective was for yesterday. That's the first part. This is new. I haven't really laid this out before. This is the first time this is coming to fruition. And then I'll ask, and I don't know why it took me this long to figure this out, that was a good thing to do. Look at what my plan was for yesterday. I hesitate to use the word objective because that has a different use in this context. What was my plan for yesterday? What was my decided goal for, that's a better way to do it. What was my decided activity or goal for yesterday? And how did I do relative to that? My goal for yesterday was to garden, and it was a Saturday, and I achieved that in spades. It really, really was a great day of gardening yesterday. So let's begin then with an assessment of how things went through the day. Something strange happened yesterday, and I probably will wrap up the entire summation of the last 24 hours with this observation. Something very strange happened yesterday. The younger me came for a visit, and he has not left. Yesterday, to tackle this enormous wilderness at our backyard, we bought this house, and we have a small garden below our house. Well, let me show you. This is our home, and there's farmland there. It's a meadow. It's a rice field that's no longer being used, so it just becomes a meadow. It's a very pleasant little place. Our land extends, you see that line, those bricks? That's our property line there. And it extends all the way over to there. Now, adjacent to that is a big big, it looks big. It's actually not that big. There's a bamboo forest right there. And then the land goes over here to where the edge of that house is. And then over there, there's this enormous plot of land that nobody has used for 70 years since the war. So we made arrangements with, we tried to buy it. And The owners are not interested in selling, but as the land hasn't been used in two full generations, it's just sitting there empty. We were basically, they said, we don't want to sell it to you, but you can have it, basically. They said, nobody ever uses it. It's just wild, crazy land. Have at it, do whatever you want. Chop down trees, anything you want. So we gained access to all of that. And that's not uncommon here in Japan. So this happens often. Land is quite plentiful here. Believe it or not, for a small island nation, land is quite plentiful here, and there's not enough people to take care of it. So if someone wants to take care of it, the owners are usually happy to relent and to give it over. That's the case. So I had cleared a trail through the bamboo forest, and I had spent the spring clearing, because remember, the land back there hasn't been managed by humans in 70 years. It's quite wild back there. So then I cleared a plot of land that would be sufficient for about 5 rows of vegetables. That'd be our initial vegetable patch. And I thought that was not going to be enough. It turns out that when the summer switches on in this part of the country, it switches on with a vengeance. The fecundity, the rank ability of this environment with this ample water and sunlight and this humid atmosphere and just this pleasant, temperate climate, temperate rainforest is what it is. It's just, the land is just, once it turns on at summertime, it's crawling over itself to serve, to just listen to the sounds out there. So what happens, it started out, they switched on, and it overwhelmed my wife and I. We were just like, whoa, what's going on? We got 3 rows of vegetables in, planted tomatoes, green peppers, and eggplant. Planted those 3 rows, and then we stood back. I set up some trellises, we stood back, and the world just went nuts out there. Now, what's interesting is that the forest land just, because remember I had cleared a space of land around which the surrounding 70, which go back hundreds of years of vacant land, was surrounding it. Like imagine it like Moses parting the sea with the great walls of water on either side. That's what it was like with the forest. And then as soon as the summer switched on, bam, it just collapsed like Moses' walls of water collapsing upon the Egyptian pharaoh and their and his charioteers. That's what happened. And it overwhelmed us. We couldn't do anything about it. And it's amazing because we're retired. You'd think that we would have all the time in the world. The mosquitoes were a bit of a problem. They turned on as well. So we were kind of, even though we might have, we didn't have a lot of energy, we found that the heat was taking a lot out of us. So combine that with the surprise, the heat, the mosquitoes, all of that. And Miko and I just kind of relegated ourselves to just periodically going back there and harvesting a cucumber, or not a cucumber, but a pepper, a green pepper, or an eggplant, or a handful of tomatoes, and just let the nature do its thing. Anyway, all that came to an end yesterday. Or actually, we conspired from midweek, last week. Yumiko and I went out and we decided we're going to outfit ourselves with proper gear. We got so that we can go back out there and take this on. So we got ourselves some light-colored. Our previous garden gear was all dark-colored, which it turns out attracts mosquitoes. So we fit ourselves some light-colored mesh clothing that is breathable. It looks kind of funny to watch. We look like we're, it's in like a space suit type of a thing, and it has the mesh that comes up over. We can, if we want to, completely cover our body. Probably overkill. Probably not. We probably don't need to be that protected. The pendulum swings, right? It goes from one to the other, right? We weren't prepared at the one end when summer kicked in. Now we're over prepared. So yesterday, and so we'll swing back. What I really need to do is model my approach after the farmers that I see, like the farmer that manages this meadow here. He comes by in weed whack sometimes. I look at him and he's really well outfitted. I don't know where he gets his clothes. I need to ask around. I'm sure that I can just ask him, find out, because they're light color, durable, they're not spacesuits, and they do the job. So I'll get it figured out. But anyway, the interesting point was yesterday was the day that I tried it out. So, and it was certainly the hottest day of the year so far. It was, this is my little humidity gauge. And right now we're at 26 degrees temperature, so it's right into the red zone now. And humidity is at what is that? 82%. So it's hot and it's humid. And what's going to happen is the temperature is going to continue to climb into the 30s, and the humidity will probably drop down here a little bit to 70 or something like that. It's going to be another scorcher today. But yesterday was the same. So it seemed like a fool's errand to decide that that's the day, the hottest day so far of the year. That's the day we're going to reclaim the garden. Yet I did. And I documented it. The Retiring in Japan Kenohi Days video that is just uploading just now. That's why I got a late start on the Good Life meditation this morning. I was determined to upload that before I started this. That's going to way that it's going to be going forward if you see this. Normally I'm going to try to start at 5:30 a.m. unless I don't have the previous days. I'm going to try to upload the previous day's Retiring in Japan video before I start this, so I don't have two little projects that are mixed up. Have a nice clean cut on the one before the other. So if I'm starting late, that's what's going on. So the good news is there's no bad news. The great news was it worked. I put on the gear, I went out into the garden, and I kicked ass. I worked so hard. I mean, 3 or 4 months ago in the early, 3 months ago in the early spring, if I had worked as hard as I did yesterday, I probably would have been in the hospital. I don't know what was going on, and I felt like I kept saying, Kurt, you're overdoing it. You're in bad shape. Stop. And I thought, but I feel great. I feel great. Finally, I forced myself, and what I did was I cleared. Look at this. This was all wilderness down there yesterday. All that cleared land down there, I cleared all of that. Yoko came by and she cleaned up the tree here, and I cleared all that land. I cleared all of that land. You can see the big pile of debris that I haven't put into bags yet. I did that so that I could let the insects slide away. I cleared all the land over there as well. When I finished, I didn't even take a shower. I just took off the gear. I went down. I was wearing my swimsuit underneath it. That was the nice thing about the white suit that I was wearing. All I was wearing underneath it was my swimsuit. In fact, if I work today, I won't even wear a shirt under that. I'll just wear the swimsuit. Then I went down, jumped in the river, hung the suit off the balcony there and to dry, and I went and jumped in the river. I came back. I felt great. So great, in fact, that we went for lunch. After lunch, Yumiko and Yoko decided to go shopping together. I was left to my own devices, so I hopped in the Jimny. I drove to Mochimune Beach with my swim fins that I brought from California, and I went for an ocean swim. I literally swam out into the sea, and I was paddling through the sea, doing my thing, and I came back from that feeling great. And when we came home, we had dinner, I went for a long walk, and I still felt great. And I still feel great right now. What the heck is going on? Who is this guy? What have I become in the last 24 hours? I'm absolutely astonished, because if you followed these videos, even partially, you'll know that a frequent observation that I'm making is how quickly my body and my mind are degrading down. Yesterday seems to have been in process, a noteworthy instance of retrograde motion, where I feel right at this moment, I feel like I remember feeling at about 25 to 28 years old, without the mental baggage. The stress, and that was the title of yesterday's Retiring in Japan video, the stress is gone. I feel fit, strong, without the stress, and without the impending worry of the great journey, unknown journey of adulthood that lies ahead. Because that was a problem for me when I was in my mid-20s. Well, that is, I knew that I had a journey of adulthood ahead of me. Didn't know how long it would last, but I wanted to make good use of that time, and to now have reach the other side of that, so to speak, the other side of the mountain. Sometimes I feel like Moses climbing Mount Pisgah, at the end of the 40 years, right? Looking out at the promised land. He may not ever, Moses knows he'll never go to the promised land. That will be the land that's promised to his descendants. Let's never mind the fact that someone already lives in the promised land. just put that aside for a moment. That moment in the Bible when Moses stands upon Mount Pisgah with Aaron looking out over the land, that seems like just before he dies, just before both Aaron and Moses die, really does sometimes remind me of what it's like to be at this late stage. So, just in quick summary, yesterday was an astonishing day. Full-on engagement with the garden for hours on what was certainly the hottest, most humid day of the year, in the late to mid-morning hours, the hottest times of the morning. It should have wiped me out, and I came out the other side feeling like Superman. Then I even went to the ocean and went for a long ocean swim, which should have hammered the nail in my coffin. Yet I had a great evening. And then now the next morning, I feel absolutely fantastic. I know I'm repeating myself now. I'm just so astonished. I don't know where this came from. I don't know why this is happening all of a sudden. I don't know if it'll last, but there you go. Vitality returns. So that's enough of yesterday, the astonishing day yesterday. There's nothing to note in terms of, there's just the pedestrian daily observations, perhaps, that I'm slowing everything down and taking things more apace, which allows me to do them. A few things ambush me anymore. There's that. Noted. Okay, as for the creed, my 8 objectives are as follows. I think I'm just going to do a cursory enumeration of them. Number 1, to be always ready to die. Number 2, to make good and effective use of my time. Number 3, to develop and maintain good and sound life principles relative to the values in my creed. Number 4, to cultivate good emotional reactions. 5, to perform good actions relative to my creed. Let's see if I can get number 6 right. That's the one I usually mess up, right? Number 6 is to recognize my true limits and true opportunities, right? I didn't mess it up. Number 7 is to do just one thing at a time. And do that thing slowly, deliberately, and carefully. And number 8 is to keep my balance. Oh, I want to make a note as long as I'm here. I've been getting a lot of email lately from people writing to me with very interesting observations. These are all email that warm email, quite welcome. I welcome the criticisms too, but these are for people telling me about things that watch these videos. I really do appreciate that. I haven't responded. This all started this new wave. I've always get cards and letters, but this latest wave started this week, and I haven't really responded to any because I'm waiting for a moment when I have a good, clear peace of mind to respond well. So if anyone's out there watching right now, or you see this video later, as I know some of you who have written to me will, because you tell me you watch these videos. I have received your emails, and I will be responding. Your emails are the type of emails that deserve an honest block of time and reflection. They're not the type of emails that you just get out, right, the response. So that's what I'm waiting for. So maybe a trip to Starbucks early in the week or something like that, to sit there with a cup of coffee and respond to everybody. Okay, so I've gotten through the creed. I need to read one. I didn't get through it all. I need to read one principle. Yesterday I read. See, I remembered to earmark the pages. Yesterday I read the uphill climb. Today I'm going to read arena and utility. Didn't I read that yesterday? No, I didn't. Arena and utility. I'll explain it. Here, I'll read it first. Principle number 32. Every place and situation are an opportunity to practice and refine our objectives and principles. Ask yourself at every point through the day what utility and good end might be found for the employment of your reason. And I did read this one yesterday. Yeah, this is the one I did yesterday. Never mind. So let's go to number 33. Nothing is enough. And actually this one earned itself an illustration by my daughter. Emily, my daughter, wrote or did all of the art for my book. This is not a photograph on the cover. That's a illustration made by Emily of a photograph that I made that I had on that I wanted to use. She also made art for the at the beginning of every chapter, including this chapter, The Good Life. And you can see that I asked her to make this. Nothing is enough. It's a rock in the desert with nothing is enough inscribed upon it. And what I wanted to do was to have it like that. Because when I wrote Going Alone, I wrote it as a consequence of a great adventure that I had over the course of a period of time where I went out to the desert, the East Mojave Desert, to a ghost town called Siberia, and I would make forays into the deep wilderness beyond, exploring ostensibly, but discovering, in fact. And every now and then, and I have done this, and I've left notes in here, I've left clues out there, a few clues out there, most notably one clue. There is, in fact, a place in the book where I make a note that if someone was to try to retrace the steps of the anxiety hike, which is outlined in the book, there's an Easter egg, a surprise that I left out in the desert for you to find. I don't think anybody will ever find it. I left a few clues in the book about where it is. I don't think anybody will ever find it, but it's out there. And I did leave a hearty warning that the attempt to find that Easter egg could, in fact, kill you. You'd have to do it you'd only have to be able to venture into the desert to find that Easter egg in a few, and I outline in the book the appropriate time of it, in early spring or late fall. That's the only time of the year that you could do it safely, and even then it would be dangerous. Any other time, you try to do it, you try to find that Easter egg that I left in August, and you will die for sure. And I leave a note in there that that's the case. Anyway, I left a little Easter egg and a couple of others, but mainly just one Easter egg out in the desert for anybody to find in the future, though I dare say nobody ever will. And I hope nobody dies trying. I leave like a half dozen warnings throughout the book. You will die if you try. But it's there nonetheless. I left a similar Easter egg out here in the mountains of Japan too. It's out there as well. Anyway, Nothing is Enough, the illustration created by Emily, is a rock in the desert, and I imagined that someone would stumble across it and read Nothing is Enough and wonder what that meant. And it's actually summarized in my principle, number 33, Nothing is Enough. Let's begin reading it. It begins with a quote by the inimitable Dr. Johnson. I'll take in Dr. Johnson's booming voice. Frugality, sir, is not only the basis of quiet, but of beneficence. Hey, Tim, if you're out there, Dr. Johnson, your countryman, right? My hero. I love that. Frugality is not only the basis of quiet, but of beneficence. I read that. I'm a big fan of Dr. Johnson. I've got a 200-year-old set of his complete volume, Rambler series over here, and I read that in there. Here's my writing. We start out life in pursuit of whatever might satisfy our aching desire to become sated at the banquet of life. That's a hell of a sentence. Education, career, friendship, family, and belief are each in turn stuffed into the yawning crevasse opening onto an indifferent universe hard at work exchanging order for night. A cosmos incapable of sympathy to our plight, without pity for our pain, with no awareness or interest regarding our dreams. We try and we try, doing everything we think we should, to no avail and no relief. Nothing ever enough. Nothing ever being quite enough. Until one day we realize that we are saved when we discover that nothing is enough. Sorry if I look a little smug and self-satisfied I'm very pleased and proud of that one. That one, the reason I'm pleased and proud of myself is sometimes I have these ideas and then I foment them into a principle, and then I struggle to put that principle to words that I think tries to capture the principle, and maybe some essence of the landscape of experience and mind that gave way and led me to that principle. And that one did. So if I do say so myself, and I did. So there we go. All right, on to the next 24 hours. Oh, it's a flea market day. Always a fun day when it's a flea market day. So what that means is I'll finish up here. I'm going to wrap up here in just a second. I'll read any comments. I'll do an antique listing for the day, and then I'm going to no radio exercise today. It's Sunday, and then I'm going to take the dogs for a walk while Yumiko prepares breakfast, and then we'll pick up Yoko and we'll go to the flea market, and hopefully I'll get some goodies to add to my store. Loving being an antique dealer again. It's so much fun. It's really starting to become fun. Let's read comments. Hi, Robert. Good morning. Nice haircut. Thank you. Isn't it great? Yeah, Taka did a great job. He gave me a magazine of young 20-something-year-old young Japanese men to look at, asking me, pick one, pick a style. And I'm like, I don't know if any of these styles are suitable for a guy my age. Yet I found one. I showed it to him, and he gave me that cut, and I love it. Maybe that's the cause of the vitality that I feel, because I've got a young man's haircut. Hi, Tim. Good morning. Another strange one in retirement. I think of jobs to do, garden, etc., and lack the will, get stuck into it, and it's like I have a superpower, exactly as you described. Really surprising. Isn't it interesting, Tim? I've noticed the same thing too. It seems like there's you can cross an inertia hurdle, right? Once you can kind of, if you can get over the hump, it's kind of, you know what I think of sometimes, Tim? It's like a soldier in picture World War One, and I don't mean to be flippant with World War One or No Man's Land or trench warfare, but you picture the soldier, on the embankment, ready for the call sign to go, and in fear and not so sure, and what the hell, and then they get the call sign and they're up and they're over the top. Can you imagine the adrenaline kicking in as you're flying through? I mean, you may be going to your doom, but that's how it feels sometimes once I'm out in the garden. Now the problem is, and this is where the surprise was, the problem is usually that experience, as energized as I feel, leaves me wiped out at the end. I don't know why I'm not wiped out today. I'm going to blame it on the haircut. Thank you, haircut. It's hard to describe, indeed. Hey, Michael. Robert says hi to Michael. Hi, Michael. Good morning. Neil. Hi, Neil. Neil. Nice. Morning. All nice haircut. Kurt, looking good. Cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I got new product too. And Taka, the stylist, showed me how to use it. You rub it in your hands, your wet hands, and then you go, you give it a blow dry the hair, and then do this, and it comes straight up. I think this is going to be my new haircut, guys. Although it was fun picking it out. It was fun to sit next to Yumiko, who was sitting next to me, and going through the magazine and showing her. It's fun to find things to do together in that capacity. Tim says hi to Robert. Sarah, hi Sarah. I think sometimes we underestimate the toll on the mind and body when we embark on a big change. Maybe as you're feeling more settled in your daily routines, setting good healthy habits for mind and body. Sarah, I think you might be on to exactly what it could be. I think you're right, because if I think in mind, it's only been 6 months since coming to Japan, and the preceding year before that was hell. Separating from the family as they came over first, going kind of rogue, living in a car and out of Airbnbs for half a year, and then and all of that, and then now here. And you're right. It's finally been. Now we own the house. We've lived here for several months, and I'm getting used to the summer. I think you're right. Me right, Sarah. Thank you. I think you nailed it. Yeah, it's just acclimation, right? Sarah goes on. You're able to accomplish more and have more energy. Exactly. Robert says hi to Sarah. Robert says hi to Neil. Sarah says hi to Robert. Sarah goes on. I find too that it takes so much will to start something, especially if it's physically tolling. But doing that task actually gives you energy, moving the body, and then seeing the end result is so encouraging. Exactly. You're building upon what Tim pointed out, and I reiterate, and I echoed in my own experience as well. Both of you, I agree completely. But it seems like that difficulty getting started is a perennial experience throughout adult life. Doesn't it seem to be the case? It's maybe it's helpful, and this is me. I'm not the type to give advice, so I'm not. This is not me giving you advice. This is me taking what the two of you said and running with it. Maybe by instantiating things like garden work or and things like that into the routine of life will help to do it by virtue of the fact that, for example, if I say that on Tuesdays after 10 o'clock, after breakfast, I go to the garden, and then I do that every Tuesdays, assuming that there's nothing else going on, then that can maybe help to automate getting over the hurdle, right? Getting the momentum, starting the inertial process. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Tim, for pointing that out. Tim says, I think you're right, Sarah, especially as getting older, that enthusiasm for certain things dwindles, but force yourself and you take on renewed energy, enthusiasm. The three of us, I think, are in lockstep, man. The three of us are arm in arm, on these thoughts. This is great. Tim says, Dr. Johnson was born just a few miles from me. No kidding. Do you live close to, isn't it Litchfield? Are you, no, isn't that, what? Wasn't he born and raised in a separate place? He lived in Litchfield, right? No kidding. I don't know if I've shown you, Tim, but I've got to show off my collection. I'm very, very proud of it. This is my complete collection of the Rambler series right there. It's added to my books. It's just kind of sitting there waiting for a permanent home. Those volumes, leather-bound books, which were produced in Paternoster Row in London, are 200 years old last year. So they're 201 years old, those books, and I read them with great care. Probably before you ever discovered my channel, Tim, I had a series. Evelyn, if she's there, I know she'll watch this video because she watches every day. Evelyn, the way Evelyn and I met was I used to read aloud and record my Dr. Johnson Rambler series, the Rambler series. I would read one Rambler, I struggled to read one Rambler every day. Those things are hard to read because they're so beautifully written, and they're written in that old style of speaking. And I've got a whole playlist for my Dr. Johnson reading, and I mean to keep it up. I'm at Rambler number 53, and I need to get started. Wow, I'm so excited. I'm fanboying. You live next to Dr. Johnson, so when I get to England and I want to do my Dr. Johnson tour, I hope that maybe you and I can meet. Isn't it funny? I don't know. Isn't it funny that that Dr. Johnson lived, and when he lived in London, he lived in Johnson House, and it wasn't because his name was Johnson. It was some other guy named Johnson. Okay, Dr. Johnson trivia. Few things excite me as much as talking about Dr. Johnson, one of my heroes. Sarah says, it's funny though, even though we learned that this many times, it's still hard to start at the bottom of the hill. Isn't that the case, Sarah? Why is that? You think that, I don't know how old you are, but Tim and you and I have no excuse, right? We know this lesson, right? And the hardest part is just before, the hardest part is just when you get started. Jones 227, I remember your name, I haven't seen you for a while. When you do radio exercise, how long does it take? Can you say something about the type of exercise this involves? Sure, let me speak to it for just a little bit. So I do it with the neighborhood group here, and I'm in block, and I don't care if people know where I live. I'm in block 18. There's block 17 down there. So block 17, everybody in the block is invited. Here in block 18, when we moved in about 2 months after we moved in, the woman that runs the radio TISO, she's not the community leader, she's just the woman that organizes it. She and her husband knocked on the door and invited us to join. So I was looking forward to that. I wanted to do that. So I go every morning at 6:30 in the morning, and there's not a large group. It's mostly just all retired people, because at 6:30 in the morning, the working people and the students are on their way to work and school. And they bring the radio out, and the whole nation at 6:30 a.m. on NHK, the national Japan's national broadcasting, broadcasts 2 radio exercise events. They're back to back. One is radio exercise Dai Ichi, number 1. Ichi means the 1, and Dai means big one. And think of it as number 1. And then radio Ichi Dai Ichi, and then radio Ichi Dai Ni. And between that, there's a little stretching exercise. The Dai Ichi is the one that most people, if they're familiar with radio exercise, that everybody knows. It's got the music and the familiar stretching exercises. It's like calisthenics for sure. The Dai Ni is a little more aggressive, and a lot of people, I didn't even know Dai Ni existed until I came here and I did it the first time. And I had done Daiichi because I used to work at a Japanese company that we did it every morning. So I knew Daiichi, the moves, that no one had to teach it to me. Then the radio exercise finished, but the radio kept going on. And this is the guy with the big booming voice, you can picture him as some like, some a lot of the exercise instructors here in Japan at the schools are like small guys. But they're really tight. They're really muscular guys. And they got a big voice. He said, "Oh, radio, the Dai Ni," and I'm like, Dai Ni, what the hell? What's Dai Ni? And I didn't know there was a Dai Ni, and I didn't know any of it, but I've learned it since then. So we do Daiichi and then do Dai Ni, which is Dai Ni is a little more aggressive than Daiichi, and we do calisthenics between, and then a lot of chit chat at the start and the end of the exercise. Hopefully that answers your question, Joneser 227. Robert says hi to Joneser 227. Penguin, or Tim says, yes, Litchfield, he lived there. I'm a few miles away at Stafford, lol, very famous here. No kidding. Wow. I've heard of Stafford, and of course I've shipped something to you there, but I didn't put it together that it was close to Litchfield. Amazing. So Litchfield is definitely on my bucket list, as is Paternoster Row, as is, I would like to be able to revisit, if I do a London, when I do a London tour, a Dr. Johnson tour. In fact, I would like to see some of the places where he lived, etc. I mean, he's been a huge influence on me. I mean, it's hard for me to describe. Thoreau was a big influence on me. Emerson was a big influence on me. The Stoics were a big influence on me. But Dr. Johnson is right up there as well. And it's hard for me to pin it on because we're so different, Dr. Johnson and I. I mean, he's a very conservative religious. He was a very conservative religious man. But I think the reason that I'm so connected with Dr. Johnson, that I feel so connected to him, was that he was a principled man, he was striving all of his life to, struggling against what he would probably call the fleshy desires and his own failings, and he wrestled with trying to be a good man in spite of both his mental and his corporal corruptions, because he had Tourette's, he suffered from gout, he of course had this giant, enormous body that didn't cooperate with him, that he had this outsized intellect contained. And I'm not saying that that's me, but I'm saying that it was interesting that it's interesting to me. I was comparing myself to him in terms of my struggle with life to be a good man. That's where the comparison ends. Now, as I make an observation about his outsized intellect struggling to find its place in a life where he was not raised with advantage, he had to fight and struggle and in some ways wrestle with his principles to eke out a living for himself and his dependents, and troubled with what I think are, in some ways, probably some liberal-minded ideas. I mean, just look at his. I mean, you can look at some of the things he did, like leaving his estate to the black servant, that the former black servant that became his companion to the end of his life. The way that he was so charitable with the needy. I mean, interesting. I'm not saying. Okay, I'm going on and on, right? This is what happens whenever I fall down the Dr. Johnson hole. Tim, you might find it interesting. When we're driving, Yumiko and I are on a road trip. One of the things I do if I start to feel a little drowsy is I turn the AI on, and I'll talk with it about famous characters in history so that I can flesh out more details, assuming that the AI is telling the truth. And my favorite one is to talk with Grok about Dr. Johnson. And we have the most interesting conversations, and I learned so much. Anyway, he's such a fascinating figure and an incredible writer. His writing drips with beauty. I mean, it's the type of writing that I can barely understand it. But when I read it over and over again, and when I do understand it, it leaves me speechless. And it's a shame. It's too bad that he's kind of He's kind of his light has kind of faded from the modern scene. You know, seems like so few people even, you know, recognize him, who he is. Tim says, I've visited his house in Litchfield many times next to a cathedral. Tim, no kidding. Tim says, no kidding. Have you seen the statue, Tim, of, I think, was it in Litchfield? The statue of Dr. Johnson on this, I'm going to cry, of Dr. Johnson standing on the steps where his father was selling books. Because there's that story where when Dr. Johnson was a young man, his father, a struggling bookseller, asked the young Samuel Johnson to help him with his sales, help him run his business. And Samuel Johnson, not yet a doctor, and he was never a doctor. He was the other type of doctor. And Samuel Johnson refused. And ever since, and when he grew into a man, he really regretted that. And there's the story that he went in the rain to where his father had been selling books, and he stood there. And apparently there's a statue, and apparently I've seen it. I've seen pictures of Samuel Johnson standing with kind of a forlorn look on his face, looking down, his great figure on the steps where his father was selling books. Have you seen that statue? That's on my bucket list. Tim says, one thing or many is how the Japanese have a knack of making life good for themselves, like the hair salon with the massaging and radio exercise. We just don't get that so much here in the UK. They sure do have a knack of making life good for themselves. Counter that with also they have a way of making life incredibly difficult. Do you realize, I just learned this week, that over 80,000 Japanese simply disappear every year in Japan? That's like 250 people a day in Japan just disappear. I was kind of pondering that yesterday. I mean, it's not like it doesn't mean that they kill themselves, although I'm sure a large number of them do, but they just disappear off the face of the earth. Yes, he was 75 when Dr. Johnson passed away, a pretty good age in the 18th century. Yeah, he lived a long time. He really did. And there's so much I could go over. I could just go on and on. It sinks in over time as you read it over and over. I've seen the statue with him reading his book. Wow. All right, well, I've reached the end of the comments, and I think I will now engage with the day. I'll finish this and get started on my antique listing. It's now probably closing in on 6:30, so I'll get half an hour to get the antique listed. And then, I'll send that video live, the Retiring in Japan. I'm started doing the Retiring in Japan series again, largely encouraged by my wife, who keeps just telling me, Kanohi Kurt, which means every day, just share the everyday, because we're all going through it every day, right? Have a great day. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. It was great to realize that you're a fellow Dr. Johnson fan. I salute your kinsman. You're not your kinsman, your countryman. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Be safe, but not too safe. Bye-bye.